Well, congratulations, you made it to the very last exercise in this Python refresher. We're going to be talking about classes, and once you've got this down, you have everything you need to start making some websites with Django. I mean, it's really not that much advanced Python that's really going on. It's more about learning the Django framework, but it's good to have a nice base here in Python. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into it. Let's delete what we have now. And to make a class in Python, it's really simple. I mean, most things are in Python. I love how clean and simple Python makes things. They never really overcomplicate stuff. But to make a class, just type lowercase class space and then give your class a name. In this case, I want to make a class to represent dogs. You should make your classes in uppercase names. So you don't have to, but that's kind of the preferred way to do things. So I'm going to say capital dog here with my colon. And this colon, just like we've done like with if statements, functions, loops, whatever it is, this is saying, okay, now I'm going to have some code that's contained in here. This is where, you normally do parentheses or curly brackets. We do the colon and then indented text. So what can you put inside of a class? Well, you can put methods if you want to, which a method is just a function that's inside of a class. So I want to make a method that barks for a dog. So I would say def, just like I'm making a regular function, give this a name. So I'm going to call it bark with the parentheses. Do my colon, then hit enter, and then now I'm going to put in some information of how I want this bark function or method to work, and I'm going to say print, in all caps here, bark, just like that. Okay. So now this dog class has a method called bark, and I can actually create a dog object from this class. Now to do that, I first make a name for my variable, something like my dog, and I'm going to say this is equal to a capital dog object with the parentheses. This is how you create a new object from a class. So this is making an instance or an object of this dog class. Then I can say on my dog something like my dog dot bark, like this with the parentheses, and everything looks great. We go ahead here to the terminal and say, all right, go run this, but this doesn't work. And the reason for this is whenever you on an object from a class call a function, it'll pass in that object as the first parameter to that function. So we'll take like my dog and essentially put it right here inside as a parameter. And so you need to account for that here inside of the function. This is one thing that I don't exactly, I'm not in love with in Python, that you have to do this, but it's really simple fix. All you do is just type self as the first parameter here so you can take it in as you're working with this. So go ahead and run this code now that I've put in self here. Go to my terminal, hit run, and look, the dog just barked, okay? So if you want to make any sort of instance variable, which means variables that exist for a particular object, like my dog here, you can create them just kind of on the fly after you created this object. This is definitely different from a lot of other programming languages. So for example, if I say my dog dot name is now equal to like Fido, and I'm going to give it another instance variable like my dog dot age is equal to 16. This is totally valid, and I can go ahead and print out this information. If I say like my dog dot name and I print out my dog dot age, gotta make sure that's a dot, not a comma. Let's go ahead and run this. You can see it puts out Fido and 16. So it's not like you have to go up into the class and say, okay, one of our instance variables is going to be name and the next one is going to be age. Like, you don't have to be that specific, which for some people will drive them nuts, because it's like, no, you've got to have order to your classes and say what your properties are going to be. But it's also cool that you can just kind of create these things on the fly. You can also, if you want to, create class variables. If I say something like dog info here and I set this thing equal to, hey, dogs are cool, this is going to be a class variable that can be accessed anywhere. It's not like tied to a specific instance. So for example, after all this code, if I come down and say print, and I want you to print out capital dog dot, and I give it this class property dot dog info, check this out. It'll go ahead and print that out. Hey, dogs are cool. And if you want to, you can update whatever this dog or class property is going to be. So if say dog.dog info, maybe set this equal to, hey there, Okay, this should update whatever dog info is. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Boom, you can see now it's equal to hey there. Okay, so that's kind of the basics when it comes to classes, right? To make instance variables, you kind of just do that on the fly. You don't really specify those here inside of the class. If you want to make methods, which are just functions inside of a class, make sure to always have self as the first parameter. And it's like if you want to take in another parameter inside of here, that's fine. You just do comma. If I want to take in a string or something, I'm just going to do str as for the name for that parameter. I can now print out bark plus whatever is inside of string. Okay, and so now when I call bark, I'm going to put in just some random text like this, and you'll see when you run this, it says bark and then adds those other things on there. So that's how you can have multiple parameters with those methods. The one last thing that I'd like to show you is how you can create init methods with a class. So let's go ahead and delete the stuff about the class variables. That's just going to kind of complicate things here. So if we want to, and let's go ahead and delete this, if we want to make a new dog, but we always want to say, hey, when we create a new dog, we should give it some instance variables like a name and an age, maybe fur color, stuff like that. You can make an init function that will take these things when you're creating a new object. So you just say def space, and you have to get this exactly right. You do underscore underscore init underscore underscore, and then you do your parentheses. And this is where you take in some parameters about what you want inside of this init method. So of course, we have to have self as the very first one, but then after that, we could take in some other things like name, age, fur color, right? All these things. And then inside of here, to set these instance variables, what you do is you take in the instance, which is the very first variable here, which we called self, and we say, self.name is now going to be equal to whatever this name parameter that came through here. So we're going to say that's equal to name. Then we're going to say self.age is equal to age, and self.fur color is equal to fur color. All right, so now that we have this code right here of just saying, I'm going to make a new dog object is no longer valid. In fact, if we go ahead and try and run this in the terminal, it's saying, hey, you're missing 3 required arguments inside of this, init function here, the name, age, and fur color. So whenever we now make a new dog object, we have to at least pass these 3 things inside of here. So I might say, Fido for the name and 13 for the age, and then fur color is going to be something like brown. So now if I provide those things, okay, and go back to my terminal, hit run, totally valid code. And if you want to check that these actually made instance variables, you can say, okay, go ahead and print my dog dot age. Okay, so we'll go ahead and hit save on that, run this, boom, look, it prints out 13. So that means we passed in 13 as the age, and went ahead and set that thing as an instance variable. Now what's kind of crazy about all of this is there's nothing too special about the word self here. Like in any of these methods that we have here, like I can just call this the dog or something like that, and as long as I whenever refer to this instance, I just put like the dog, instead of self I put like the dog. Okay, this should completely work. Go ahead and run this. Look, yeah, it's totally fine. Now, it is the common practice, and you should always take in that first parameter as self. You'll notice, like most text editors that work with Python, like the self is highlighted as red, as saying, okay, now we're talking about this instance. So it's definitely good practice to follow that, and you should always be doing that with your code. But once you got that down, I will say one more thing about this init function. It might be good if you want to, for example, just provide default values for these, like say name by default could maybe just be an empty string, age could be equal to 0, and fur color can be equal to an empty string. If you provide default values, then you can actually go ahead and use this, dog with the parentheses here, not have to pass in anything, and that's totally valid. So kind of another option that goes back to when we were talking about functions and some of the cool things we can do there. And that's it. It's time to move on. I'll see you in the outro.